All right, happy Tuesday, everybody.
Yay,
And give
Tuesday.
another minute for people to join us. Happy last Tuesday of January. I know, hard to believe. January does always seem kind of long after the holiday.
Long in some ways and fast in others, 'cause
Exactly.
it's like, okay, we're done with that month and let the others come on.
All right. Hello, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well on this Tuesday. I know it's a little warmer this week, which is nice. Last week was a little crazy. I know our school system was barely in school, so I think they went one day. It's kind of crazy. All right, we'll go ahead and get started since, as we know, this can go really quickly for 30 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrea Young. I am the ECAC parent educator and communications lead, and we are happy to have Doreen Byrd with us today, who is the lead parent educator with ECAC, and she is going to be talking about resolving Section 504 disputes, even if you do not have a 504. So I'm going to turn that right over to Doreen.
All right, well, I'm happy to be with you guys and happy to have you here. Section 504 is one of those laws that a lot of people have heard about, but don't fully understand everything. And we're not really going to do a full-fledged Section 504 workshop in a half hour. But anyway, I'm Doreen Byrd, lead parent educator with ECAC. I've been with ECAC for 26 years now, so getting kind of long in the tooth here. And so we're just carving out a little bit of this topic to address today. We got our info about ECAC. I am making the assumption that most of you guys have been here before, so I'm not going to belabor the point. We'll get to the meat of it, but it is part of the presentation, and we will send out a copy of the PowerPoint following the workshop. And so you'll have this as well as the contact information at the end of the presentation. But for a starting point, do our disclaimer. Because we are talking about a law, I want to make it clear that number one is this is not a comprehensive training on Section 504, so you're not going to learn everything that you ever wanted to know about 504. We're focusing, as I said, on one particular aspect of it as far as how to address the disputes, but we'll, have to put some context, so we'll get that too. I am not an attorney. I don't even play one on TV. And I can't give and don't give any legal advice. So anything that you hear should not be construed as legal advice. And later we will be able to take some, questions and all that. So hopefully none of that will lead into any, questionable territory. Can't really address individual issues, and sometimes folks will ask questions and it's like, yeah, but it depends if this, if that, yada yada. And it really is the case. Most of the time when you're talking about the educational students with disabilities, those little details make a difference. And so if you are having some personal issues or want to get assistance with an individual situation, give us a call and we'll try to work through your child situation. All right, like I said, we need some context. So Section 504 is a federal civil rights law, and the full name of it is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So that's when the law first came into being. And as I said, it's a civil rights law that says that no otherwise qualified individual with disabilities, and I'm just reading it because this is the law, shall solely by reason of his or her disability be excluded from participating in or be denied the benefit of any program or activity receiving federal assistance. Well, of course, our public schools get federal assistance, so they have to comply with Section 504. But there's actually other programs as well, Head Start programs. They're programs that just get grants for a specific purpose, may participate in the school lunch program. Some parks and rec, day camps do the school lunch stuff. If they get any kind of federal funds for anything, they have to comply with Section 504. But today we're talking about schools, of course. So who is protected? Anybody, basically we're talking about what their definition of disability, person with disability is. So an individual who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity, and we'll break down sort of each of those key pieces, there's like 3 terms there that we'll break down. If they have a record of such an impairment, or even are regarded as having such an impairment. Now, the folks who have a record of or regarded of, the main issue there is that they're protected from discrimination. It's not that the school would have to actively, create a plan or do anything for them, but they can't discriminate against them just because, well, I heard you used to be over here, or, you got treatment for this thing, in the past, or there was some issue here, that kind of thing. So they're protected from discrimination. Physical or mental disorder, can count, and I guess the title should have been a little different. Any organs, anything that has to do with the body, basically, if there's some loss of function in terms of any of those systems, that can potentially qualify. The mental or psychological disorder is pretty broad as well. It can include intellectual disabilities, just about anything that we would call a developmental disability. That organic brain syndrome is old language for what we now know as ADHD. For the most part, that's what they're talking about. Emotional or mental illness, and specific learning disabilities. But even folks that have a cosmetic disfigurement, they may not have a loss of function, but if, again, something about them looks different and it's causing people to treat them differently, then that can fall on a heading of being protected by Section 504. Okay, so we talked about the physical or mental condition that has a substantial limitation. So what do we mean by that? That means if you're looking at just regular things, major life activities that people engage in, on a day-to-day basis, if somebody's unable to do those things, or they can do them, but they're very, very limited as far as under what conditions they can do it, how long they can do it, what supports or assistance is required for them to be able to do it, so any kind of significant restrictions would still count as a substantial limitation. And sometimes those things are obvious, to our young man here, and sometimes they're not going to be visible to the naked eye. I'm going to move the cursor over here so it doesn't pop out the box. So these are just examples of some major life activities. It's not an exhaustive list, okay? But basically, being able to take care of yourself, using your hands, being able to talk. A lot of times schools will sort of hyper focus in on learning as the major area of life activity, but that's not the only consideration. Whatever problem does have to be something that is impacting the individual with regard to them participating in school and accessing the school program, but it doesn't have to be just learning. So concentrating, being able to walk, think, communication, etc. So like I say, these are just examples. 504 is a big umbrella, and basically it covers all the students that receive special education services on IEPs. So those are identified students with disabilities who clearly have some substantial limitation, otherwise they wouldn't have those plans, so it's almost a given. And then you have some kids that have disabilities that require some adjustments in order for them to have that equal opportunity to benefit from the school program. And so if they require supports or accommodations, then, typically they're going to be documented on a Section 504 plan. You have other students that have disabilities that may not be impacting them in a way that they require a 504 plan in terms of having ongoing support, but they still would be protected from discrimination. Okay, so big umbrella, it covers them all. Okay, under Section 504, public schools are required to ensure that the students are receiving a free, appropriate public education. Now, for most students, that's going to be access to the regular public school program. For some students, that's going to be access to special education services as well. And under IDEA, definition of FAPE sort of ends with, you got all these words, but it ends with in conformity with the child's IEP. So basically the IEP is what defines FAPE for children who qualify for special education services. Students have to be provided an equal, students with disabilities, provided with an equal opportunity to access the public school program and all aspects of it, be able to participate in it and gain benefit from it. And we don't need bodies just sort of sitting there in the room. There should be efforts made to ensure that they're actually benefiting from the program. Section 504 even covers non-academic areas and things like extracurricular activities. So if we're talking about field trips, as well as after school activities that may be taking place, the sports and the clubs and things like that, would still be under the 504 umbrella. Okay. Public schools are required, or school systems are required to develop and implement a Section 504 policy. And there's some key components that have to be part of that policy. There has to be some process or procedures for evaluating students to see who is eligible for a 504 plan. Who is on the committee that's making those decisions is typically going to be explained in the school district's 504 policy. And that's something that may vary from one school system to the other. And when I say school system, let me clarify that charter schools are considered to be their own separate little school systems. So charter schools fall under that umbrella as well. So they would have to have their own 504 policy. There must be a grievance or appeal process indicated in that policy. They have to have a parent handbook so that parents understand what their rights are. When it comes to discipline of students with disabilities, if they have a 504 plan, then there has to be some procedures in place to ensure that they're not being punished for that disability effectively. And really, it's Section 504 that kind of requires that manifestation determination review process under IDEA, where you're looking at whether or not a behavior that the child's being disciplined for and facing a change of placement is caused by or substantially related to their disability. Because if you punish them for that, and it is caused by their disability, that effectively amounts to discrimination. So it's actually the 504 requirement that has led to the IDEA manifestation determination review. And Section 504 doesn't have a spelled out step-by-step. Again, it's kind of broad terms. It says, don't do this stuff. Don't go around discriminating. So oftentimes schools will pretty much utilize a similar policy or process as they do with the EC students, with the manifestation determination review, because there is a structure there that they can latch onto instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. There has to be some sort of plan to inform parents and staff about the Section 504 policy and make sure that the staff understand what their roles and responsibilities are. Because policies don't do any good if they just sit in the shelf. People need to know that they're there. All right, so all of those are required per federal regulations. And of course, the regs spell out the rules for carrying out the law. All right, so for kids that are in the process or somewhere along the way of either trying to get a 504 plan or they have a 504 plan. So when I say 504 process, that's what I'm talking about there. Depending on where they are, you may have different issues that come up and going to be handled a little bit differently. If they're in you're trying to apply, for them to, or you made a referral request for the child to get a 504 plan, and there's some lack of conviction, or people aren't convinced that the child really needs one. So we have disputes about eligibility. Or maybe they say, okay, the kid's eligible, but now y'all debating what to put in the plan. I don't think he needs this. Well, I think he does, et cetera. Sometimes those disputes can be addressed by getting additional information, because people are making decisions based on what's sitting in front of them. So if there's info, and it could be past performance data, it could be evaluation reports or reports from therapists who've worked with the child, tutors, other people that know them. It could be, hey, let's pull his discipline record and take a look at it, or let's pull those old EOG, the EOG scores and look at the pattern over time. So sometimes things will come up that they really can't make a decision on, or the team gets stuck, I'll say, because they need more information, or at least more information may be the turning point that gets them to reconsider. But if basically we go, well, we don't have any data that says that he needs this, then the question is, okay, so how can we gather, relevant data so that a couple of months from now we can sit down again and maybe, have this discussion with some actual facts in front of us. So if there's a void that people know is there, well, we don't, obviously have enough information to say that, then, look for ways that that information can be gathered. If it already exists, like I say, then it's a matter of getting it and sharing it with the team. Sometimes it's formally documenting stuff that has been orally reported. If things aren't in writing, they don't really happen. And so you want to make sure that you've got written documentation of any diagnoses. So say a kid may have a 504 plan based largely on ADHD, for example, but they also have anxiety. Well, there's a difference between a kid who experiences some anxiety versus a kid who's been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And so if the child's been diagnosed with anxiety disorder, having some written documentation of that can be a game changer as far as getting the team to put some accommodations in place that address that aspect of the child's experience. Sometimes you need to change the players. So having people there that maybe have more expertise in the disability area that the child experiences, or somebody that knows this particular kid. Again, there may be people that are working with that child outside of school, or staff, that work closely with them that are in school but just weren't invited to the meeting. Maybe making sure that that teaching assistant who works closely with your kid is actually at the table, or last year's teacher who may know the kid much better than a teacher that's has only met them or known them for a few weeks. So anyway, having people there to have some expertise. So now, like I say, either change the information or you change the players. That's one way of getting different outcomes. Now, say the kid has a plan, but the issue is compliance, and there's accommodations that aren't being put into place. As a general rule, we're always going to suggest trying to address problems at the lowest level possible. So go to the scene of the crime, and start there. So if a child reports that something happened in their science class, then start with the science teacher. Sometimes it's a matter of I'll say ignorance, and I use that in the best way possible, is the person may not be aware that the child, even has a 504 plan. These days, especially when we have so much staff turnover and things, and if you got a kid that's moving from, say, elementary to middle or middle to high school, sometimes information does not get relayed as clearly and as efficiently as we would like. And so you may have people, in these classrooms trying to work with kids who have no clue that they even have plans or what's on them, or full understanding of what these things mean. So again, you want to make sure that the people who are supposed to be implementing the plan are aware. Hey, just want to make sure you knew that Johnny has a 504 plan and its content. Now, if it's a matter of you have one understanding of what a certain accommodation means, but a certain teacher is interpreting it a different kind of way, then y'all may need to meet and sit down and clarify the language. Just like with IEPs, you want to write 504 plans so that people don't have to be in the room writing a plan in order to understand what that means. So the language needs to be clear. And you can always go, for example, you make a statement about what you want to have done and give examples of what that looks like so that next year's staff, who are looking at the plan will understand what that is. So things can be clarified. And then if it comes down to, okay, they understand what they're supposed to do, but they're not doing it, then you just follow the chain of command to address that. And that'll be on the next slide. I want to point out that the schools, every school district, again, including our charter schools, has somebody who's designated as the system level 504 coordinator. And they're responsible for making sure that all the staff and all the schools basically know about the 504 policy, are complying, following the policy and following the law effectively. So that's a central office level role. It's often not that person's job title. If you were to Google usually when I'm trying to find them, I'll just put section 504, and then under the section where they have information about 504, they'll generally lead to a person, but their job title may be something like federal programs supervisor or student services lead person. So the title can be different, but there's somebody who has that role. And, once you've exhausted things at the building level, then that's often the next step in terms of where do you go from there. So as how is kids that have IEPs, because again, we're not talking at this point about 504 plans. So how does 504 impact his IEPs? Well, if schools fail to provide that equal opportunity to access, participate, and benefit from all aspects of the program, that's still going to be a problem because they have to do that for all students with disabilities, right? Including our kids that have IEPs. If the team refuses to include accommodations, so say again, we may have a dispute about what goes on that IEP. And if, say, the parent feels like that that accommodation is necessary for that child to have the equal opportunity to benefit from or to demonstrate their knowledge or to be able to participate in the school activities, but the team is saying no, then it's both an IEP and a 504 issue if that's interfering with their access. So some things sort of straddle. And I will say this, I hate to hop around, but when you go looking up some of the guidance on the U.S. Department of Education's website, some of the federal guidance, it can be very confusing because they'll bounce around between IEPs and special ed stuff versus general 504 requirements because of the fact that 504 covers the kids with IEPs too. And so you kind of have to tease it out with which ones are covering which thing and what are we talking about here. So they talk about the child find and all that, but the child find is part of IDEA. 504 doesn't say you have to actively go out and look for kids, but once their disability has been brought to your awareness, then you have to address it. So the requirements are different, and trying to tease a little bit of that out can be a little complicated. But the child is denied access to parts of the school program or activities. Say they're not allowed to eat lunch in the cafeteria. For some reason, everybody's eating lunch in class just because they're in self-contained class. That can be something that gets challenging. Maybe that they're not allowed to have recess because of problems caused by the disabilities. You didn't behave well, so you can't do recess. You didn't do your work, so you stay in and do work, and you don't go out and do recess. They did that with my son who has ADHD. He's grown now, but he wasn't allowed to go to recess, and it didn't get the work done. All that it was cause him a loss of opportunity for social interaction with his peers and burn off some energy. So we made his afternoons worse. But anyway, but not accessing that part of the program is a problem. If there's a criteria set is, well, you can do these things. Let's say the school is having some sort of a classroom celebration at the end of the quarter for kids that have no referrals, nothing but green smiley faces all, quarter long, blah, 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 blah. So basically, if there's a criteria that's set, and it's a criteria that this child cannot meet because of their disability, we know that there's going to be something that's going to happen, for this kid, then it's not fair, effectively to set up a condition that he's never going to be able to participate with that classroom activity. I ran into that with a family that I dealt with, at some point early, a few years ago, where they went on these multiple celebrations, and it was like the parent got to where they didn't send the kid to school that day because they just got parked in another classroom of another grade while all the fourth graders went out and did fun stuff, and effectively we raised that as a 504 issue and asked them to adjust the standard to still provide some incentive for the kid to try to behave better and all that kind of stuff. So, we'll look for some improvement, but you can't set the bar at a point where there's no way the kid's going to be able to reach it. Sometimes we'll have the kids if they're in self-contained classes, the parents aren't even told about things. Oh, they're doing, sign-ups for the clubs or tryouts for sports or these kind of things. They aren't even getting information that this stuff is happening. Driver's ed is, sign-ups are happening and parents aren't informed. That's a problem. That we're singling out groups of kids who aren't getting information that other groups of kids are, just because they have a disability. If we have the EC classroom physically located away from everybody else, sometimes they'll tuck them away in a separate little room. You know, there've actually been schools where only EC kids were out in the trailers. You know, so if somebody saw you walk out the door and head to a trailer, they automatically knew you were an EC student because those were the only classrooms out there. Now, if there's a mixed bag and we got a whole bunch of different folks, there's nothing saying you can't put an EC classroom in a trailer, but they just can't be, like I say, isolated and be the only ones. Sometimes kids are allowed to go to field trips or something only if their parent attends. Well, it's a safety concern, you know, and we want to make sure somebody's there to keep an eye on. Well, they can't do that. They can't put a condition on one child that doesn't pertain to the other kids in the class. You know, if there's a safety concern, then the school has to arrange for adequate staffing to support the student, and allow them to attend just like everybody else does. If a kid is being harassed or bullied and you feel like the reason for that is at least in part because of their disability, that should be brought to the attention of, you know, school staff. And then if they fail to address it, that can become a 504 issue. You know, if they know that the child is being targeted because of a disability and they don't take adequate steps to prevent that, then they're now responsible in part for that continuing bullying happening. So that's a 504 thing. All right, so here's our chain of command for 504 issues, and I realized time always gets away from me. This half hour runs really, really quickly. Again, address the problem at the level that where it occurs first. In the building, there's usually somebody who's responsible for 504, your point person. Very often it's going to be a school counselor, you know, so you can address it with them, especially if we get a situation where this teacher didn't even know that my kid had a 504 plan. Okay, well, that counselor, then person, whoever the school level 504 person needs to make sure that information is being relayed and that they're communicating with them so that all the staff who are responsible or working with the child are aware that they do have that. So level 1 may involve them. The school principal is the supervisor over all the staff in the building. So, you know, again, in terms of people doing their jobs, once they have the knowledge, then it's, you know, you can go to the principal as a staff supervisor kind of role. Then once you get beyond the building, as I said, now you're dealing with the school system, section 504 coordinator. There's other administrators that may be present, but they're not going to be knowledgeable about the nuances of section 504. So the coordinator is going to be the one, again, they're responsible for making sure everybody's following the rules. So you communicate with that person. Then you might want to go to the superintendent. You know, again, if it's a matter of people not doing their job, sometimes the issue is they're doing exactly what that school district policy says to do, but the policy itself is creating, has a discriminatory effect. Okay, it's disproportionately impacting kids with disabilities or kids with certain kinds of disabilities. Then we may need to have a change in that school system policy, and school board is who makes those changes. You know, if they set policy, the superintendent implements the policy. So, you know, again, it's like, are we needing to change it, or are we saying that people aren't doing what they're supposed to do? And that may determine who you go to. And then once you're beyond those folks, your next level is going to be the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. There's nobody at the state level that enforces Section 504. They have a 504 consultant who can provide information. They generally don't get involved in individual situations or any of that. So it's more general information about Section 504, but they don't handle complaints and that kind of thing. So if you want to file a complaint about either disability discrimination, and or if you feel like you or your child's being retaliated against because of your efforts to advocate for them, then the Office for Civil Rights can also investigate complaints about retaliation. All right, general tips, and then we'll work our way into questions. I think this is the last slide, is again, get accurate information about what did and didn't happen before you decide to take an action, because you need to have a full understanding of the situation. Sometimes that missing information can be the difference between whether or not somebody did something wrong or did we just have was there a misunderstanding, or was it just an unfortunate sequence of events that happened? Or did somebody flat out, like I say, either violate a kid's plan or their rights, or they did something that, was fundamentally an error that can be addressed. Put in writing, you want to document your concerns and what you're doing to resolve them. So try to, leave a paper trail there. If you did wind up having to move on, like I say, down the road up your chain of command here, you want to establish that you have tried to resolve it at a lower level. If you make a request, say for an accommodation or something like that, and it's refused, ask for the reason, because it may be that you can address that reason, by either getting additional information or saying, oh, okay, we can tweak the request or the accommodation to address that, whatever that concern was. But if you don't know why people are saying no, then it just kind of leaves you with no place to go. Okay, as far as the extracurricular activities, remember Section 504 requires schools to give the students equal opportunity, but they're not guaranteed that they're going to be allowed to participate in a particular activity. For example, if you have to try out for the band or the basketball team, then these kids still have to try out. Now they have to make sure that any accommodations they need to have an equal opportunity to do the tryouts and demonstrate what they know or what they can do. Then they have to make some accommodations on that end, but they don't automatically get a seat just because they have a disability. They still have, because again, we go back to that language that says no otherwise qualified. So in this case, if there's auditions or whatever, involved here, the people who successfully are selected become the otherwise qualified people at that point. You're not otherwise qualified just because you're interested in something. If you believe the bullying, again, is occurring because of child's disability, make sure that you include a statement to that effect when you turn in a bullying report or you send an email to report the bullying or harassment. Include a statement about, I think he's being targeted because of his disability. And that, like I say, ups the ante in terms of the school's responsibility to follow through. All right, here we are at questions. Andrew, did anything come in while I was busy yakking?
Yeah, we have one question. First, I'm going to launch the poll. If everyone can just take a few seconds to answer these questions. The grants that we work on require we report back to them that what we're doing is useful, relevant, and of high quality. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. Thank you in advance for answering those questions. We did get one question in the very beginning. I don't know if you can answer it or want to answer it, but it says, what implications do you foresee with the new administration changes?
No and no. Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and speculate about what may or may not happen. These folks, they'll do what they want to do, and we'll just have to see, and we're along for the ride. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
Basically, we're watching it unfold just like everybody else,
Yeah. Another question. Have you ever seen a family have success with the district's 504 dispute resolution process for something like an OCR complaint?
I'm not sure what you mean by, as in, did OCR find folks in violation? So was the complaint successful? The complaint successful? I'm not sure.
I guess
Because
my
part of it, you're talking about dispute resolution process internally, and then there's reference to the OCR process, which is external. So it's kind of like we got two different things there, and I'm not sure which.
I guess my interpretation is, have you seen a family have success? Oh, here we go. She said districts are supposed to have an internal process that is a different process than OCR. So have you seen that process work?
Okay, before I say something. Well, I'll just say, I'm sure that it does work for some people, again, depending on what the issue is. If folks are asking for something that they can't really justify, I suppose that you need data, you need information, you need something, for people. If people are repeatedly looking at the same set of facts, you're going to get the same conclusion. So something has to change in order to to get a different outcome. So if folks are able to sort of supplement to what's on the table, and force them to take a second look, sometimes that can work. Oftentimes the 504 coordinators at the building level won't really override a decision. But as I think about it, I've seen people reach out, again, it's sort of an informal thing, not necessarily following a formal grievance process, but reaching out to that 504 coordinator saying, here's what's going on over at my kid's school, or here's what's happening. Because sometimes it's a time sensitive matter. Again, the school's class is going on a field trip, on Friday, and on Monday you're finding out that they're not going to let your kid go because, whatever it is. And you don't have time to go through a whole bunch of investigations and this, that, and the other. So you reach out to them and raise the issue. And yes, that kind of thing I've seen work. So that actually, I've got more personal experience with families using the informal, sort of grievance process successfully than the ones who've had to go through filing formal complaints and things like that.
Great, thank you. I did have someone say that they're not seeing the link for the poll. It should have popped up on your screen. I still have it launched right now. I'm not sure why you would not be seeing it. So I apologize
Yeah,
for that. But
yeah, I'm gonna say on my screen, but my screen shouldn't be showing what they see. And if it is, then let me scroll down then, because I just got question number 1 is visible. We got number 2, somebody seeing it, because we got answers coming in.
yeah, we do have a lot of people. So I apologize if you don't see it. I don't think I can resend it. So I apologize for that. But it is still open.
Well, it
if
says
you're able to
19 of
access
19
it.
participated, so I think everybody's kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, everybody's in there.
Yeah.
All righty, so I'm gonna take that off the screen. And I'm glad that most of you are finding this stuff useful. And it's all about what it is that you need today. And if you need something in particular that is like, okay, she didn't touch on what I was really hoping to get into, call me, and then we can talk about whatever is going on there. Like I said, 504 is a very broad law, and it just issues a broad responsibility, toward the school system. And there's no funding that comes with it. People don't, often think about that, but there's no funding that comes with 504. So anything that they do to support kids under that premise, they have to find some other ways of paying for it. But because it's so broad, there's not a whole, we don't have volumes of do this certain way like you do with IDEA with special ed stuff. So a lot of it is just kind of people making judgment calls and using hopefully good information. I think one of the biggest game changers is making sure that people are involved who have some understanding of the child's disability, because that's where things fall apart a lot of times, is they don't understand why a kid with auditory processing problems would need XYZ, or what role that may have played in some incident that happened where somebody who actually understood that disability could see it. That, yeah, well, if he doesn't process what's being said to him, then that could have led to this, blah, blah, blah. So we need people that know what they're talking about. At the end of the day, that can be the game changer there, is getting folks involved who actually have a clue. All righty, and then our last little slide is just our kind of, it's not moving here.
Well, thank you so much, Doreen, for sharing this important information. I do want to tell everyone that next Tuesday, which is February, we will be having our Tool Time Tuesday about what's new at ECAC. So we will be going over all of our new fact sheets that we have out that you can access. So please join us for that informative session. Look for your February Tool Time Tuesday email coming out at the end of this week, so you can go ahead and register for those sessions. And if there's not any other questions, we will let you get back to your Tuesday. And thank you so much, Doreen, and thank you everyone for joining us.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.